What if the most common American export isn't a product, but a specific, unshakable tone of voice of confidence so complete it often arrives before any actual understanding does? This isn't about a stereotype. This is about a global pattern, a psychological phenomenon so consistent it's become a recognizable signal, cutting through the noise of cultural exchange. It's a deeply held, often unconscious belief that one's own internal logic, the map by which you navigate the world, is not just a personal perspective, but a universal operating system, and that the rest of the world is, at best, running a slightly buggy, localized version of the same software. This isn't mockery. It's diagnosis. It's about understanding the friction that occurs when a particular mindset, one forged in the crucible of a specific history and culture, encounters realities built on entirely different historical and cultural foundations. The clash is rarely loud or angry. It's often polite, earnest, and baffling to both sides. Let's start with a simple, edible case study. In a bustling Brussels cafe, a traveler from Ohio confidently ordered French fries. The waiter, with a patient smile, gently offered, "We call them frites here. They're actually Belgian, you know." The man didn't miss a beat. He waved a dismissive hand, a gesture that said the correction was not just unnecessary, but slightly quaint. Tomato, tomato. You guys get the waffle credit? Fine. But the fry? That's French. It's right there in the name. He delivered this with the serene, untroubled certainty of someone stating a fundamental law of physics. He wasn't engaging in a debate about culinary history. He was correcting a local's understanding of their own cultural artifact. In his mind, the linguistic branding was the ultimate truth, a more reliable data point than lived experience or historical record. The taxonomy of deep-fried potatoes was settled science, and the local was simply misinformed. This pattern, however, is not confined to the snack menu. It seeps into domains where precision is paramount. Consider the engineering lab at a prestigious technical university in Munich. An exchange student from Texas arrived for his first practicum on structural design. Laid out on the tables were high-quality metric calipers and rulers. From his bag, he produced his own tool, a well-worn yellow American tape measure, its increments in inches and feet. His German lab partner watched, bemused, as the student converted every millimeter specification painstakingly into fractions of an inch. When their collaborative bridge model failed its stress simulation spectacularly, the Texan's first instinct wasn't to double-check his conversions. He leaned back, scratched his head, and mused to his partner that perhaps the European engineering formulas they were using were a bit too elegant, that they lacked the real-world grit of the imperial system. Inches, he explained patiently, as if unveiling a profound insight, have a bodily truth. A foot is a foot. A thumb is an inch. The meter. That's just an abstract idea some French guys came up with in a room. It doesn't live in your body. For him, the tool wasn't just a means of measurement. It was a repository of innate, human-centric wisdom. The metric system wasn't different. It was disembodied, and therefore suspect. This reveals the first and most foundational psychological layer. The toolkit as universal truth. When the tools you grow up with, your language, your units of measurement, your economic models, your software interfaces are not only dominant in your homeland, but have also achieved global penetration. They undergo a subtle transformation in the mind. They stop feeling like culturally and historically specific instruments. They begin to feel like the fundamental, neutral parameters of reality itself. They become invisible. To then be asked to use a different tool isn't seen as adapting to a new context. It's perceived as being asked to accept a less accurate, less intuitive, frankly worse version of the world. Why would you willingly choose a blurrier lens? Now, watch this logic leap from physical tools into the nuanced realm of social and cultural ritual. In Kyoto, A management consultant from San Francisco was preparing for a crucial meeting with a potential Japanese partner. In the Genkin, the entryway, he announced to his slightly startled colleagues, "Okay, team, remember shoes off. I've done the research." This is about respect. He diligently removed his leather loafers. Then, believing he had uncovered a deeper, more authentic layer of the custom, he peeled off his socks as well, standing barefoot on the immaculate tatami matting. The Japanese hosts received him with frozen, polite smiles, a masterclass in containing profound social horror. Later, the consultant explained his reasoning. He'd read that in some traditional contexts, bare feet signaled ultimate humility and connection to the earth. He wasn't trying to be disrespectful. In fact, he believed he was performing a superior, more deeply researched form of respect. His confidence wasn't a barrier to cultural learning. In his self-narrative, his proactive, go the extra mile approach was the learning. This brings us to the core behavioral mechanism: confidence as a substitute for competence. In many American professional, social, and even educational contexts, the ability to project certainty, to speak with authority, to take up space, to propose solutions is not just an asset. It is often the primary skill that unlocks opportunity. It is interpreted as leadership, vision, and capability. This is a trained reflex, honed over years. When the individual travels abroad, this reflex does not have an off switch. The person isn't consciously trying to dominate or claim superiority. They are simply interacting with the world in the only way they have been rewarded for: by leading, by opining, by projecting a solution-oriented stance. They enter the room by trying to run the meeting, even when they have no idea what the meeting is about. It's not arrogance in the moment. It's muscle memory. We can see this reframing engine at work on history itself, turning millennia into business cases. At the Roman Forum, a guide was explaining the revolutionary composition of Roman concrete. A tourist from Florida interrupted. "Hold on," he said, holding up a finger. "Let's be real. The major innovation in durable poured aggregate. That's a 20th century story." This is interesting, but it's basically version 0.1. When the guide, with practiced calm, mentioned the small detail of a 2,000-year head start, the tourist's face lit up. Exactly. That's what I'm saying. They were the early adopters, the beta testers. Rome was totally the Silicon Valley of the ancient world. I get the vision. He wasn't dismissing the achievement. He was assimilating it. He was translating the past into the only framework he had for understanding. Monumental human achievement, the narrative of disruptive innovation, minimum viable products, and scalable tech. The past wasn't a foreign country. It was a startup incubator he was evaluating. This reframing doesn't stop at human history. It extends to the very geography of the planet. On a scenic ferry threading through Norway's majestic fjords, a passenger from Atlanta gazed at the soaring cliffs and cascading waterfalls. "It's breathtaking," he admitted to the Norwegian captain. Then he gestured broadly. "But look at this. It's pure, untapped vertical infrastructure. You could mount tiered solar arrays right on these cliff faces. You could microturbine that waterfall runoff. This isn't just a pretty view. This is a massive, naturally pre-built energy portfolio. It's just waiting for a project manager with the right venture capital." The captain murmured something about a UNESCO site and national heritage. The man nodded sympathetically. "I hear you on the sentiment, too. But sentiment doesn't generate megawatts. Progress can't be scared of a little optimization. And here we strike the second, more profound cultural filter: optimization as a moral imperative. In this worldview, efficiency isn't just a good idea. It's a moral good. If a system, a process, a tradition, or even a landscape can be made faster, cheaper, more scalable, more convenient, or more productive, then to improve it isn't merely smart, It is an ethical duty. To leave something in an unoptimized state is seen as irrational, wasteful, almost negligent. It is a failure to apply intelligence where intelligence is due. When your cultural mantra is move fast and break things, you eventually stop seeing things as artifacts or traditions. You see them as inefficiencies posing as objects. The entire world becomes a series of problems politely waiting for your solution. Thus, a woman in a Lisbon bakery, after savoring a perfect, warm pastel de nata, leaned over the counter and kindly informed the third-generation baker that a nata of the Month Club subscription service would revolutionize his business model and democratize access to this joy. She wasn't insulting his pastry. She was trying to scale its emotional payload. In Seoul's vibrant Gwangjang market, a man watched an elderly woman deftly assemble a hotteok pancake in seconds, a dance of muscle memory perfected over 40 years. He suggested she implement a digital QR code ordering system to streamline the transaction and reduce customer friction. He didn't see a master at work. He saw a point-of-sale bottleneck. This instinct to help, to fix, to innovate upon carries a quiet, profound assumption that the baseline state is one of brokenness or lack. It assumes the local way is the old way, and the new, efficient, scalable way is inherently, objectively superior. The value of continuity, of mastery, of ritual, of experience itself, is often invisible in this calculation because it doesn't show up on a spreadsheet in a Marrakesh souk. A tech entrepreneur from Austin watched a weaver spend an entire day on a single, intricate rug. The craftsmanship is phenomenal, the entrepreneur said. Truly. But have you considered the scalability issue? If you digitize these patterns, an AI could generate hundreds of unique designs in an hour. You could then focus on the high-value task of material selection and final quality control. You're an artist. You shouldn't be the printer. The weaver smiled and said the pattern wasn't in a book. It was in his fingers, learned from his father. The pattern changed slightly with his mood, with the light. The entrepreneur returned the smile. A look of genuine compassion for a brilliant mind trapped in an analog, non-scalable prison. This isn't malice. It's the logical endpoint of a worldview where the primary metrics of value are growth, scale, and measurable output. Why create one transcendent rug when you can produce 10,000 good ones? Why savor a single, small, perfect espresso when you can sell a bucket-sized cup of adequate coffee? Why preserve a 3-hour midday siesta when that represents a clear deficit in productive manners? The friction, the true cultural collision, happens when this worldview encounters cultures that define value by entirely different metrics, by continuity, by depth, by quality of experience, by social cohesion, by harmony with nature, by the simple act of being rather than producing. In a Vienna coffee house, a traveler from Seattle grumbled that his espresso was about 2 sips worth. In America, he told the waiter, we understand caffeine is a utility. It's fuel for doing things. The waiter, polishing a glass, replied softly, here, the coffee is not for the doing. It is for the talking, for the sitting. The fuel is the conversation. The man looked genuinely confused. In his mind, the two purposes weren't in conflict. One was just a more direct, efficient route to the same goal, human functioning. Even well-intentioned attempts at cultural sensitivity get processed through this optimization filter. A volunteer in a rural Vietnamese village, hoping to help a community center, suggested they build a website and launch a social media campaign to attract more international volunteers and donors. The village elder thanked her warmly and said they preferred that people come, see with their own eyes, share a meal, and understand the place before deciding to help. Later in her project notes, volunteer wrote, noted, significant. Infrastructure hurdle due to local resistance to digital outreach and preference for inefficient T's. High-touch recruitment. She had faithfully translated a philosophy of human connection and relational trust into a logistical and tactical problem. What we are witnessing, in aggregate, is a colossal, unconscious act of cultural teleportation. The individual does not travel to a new logic. They bring their entire home operating system to assumptions, its values, its definitions of success and intelligence, and beam it fully intact into the new location. They then proceed to interact with the hologram of their own logic, surprised when the physical world doesn't align. The Pyramids of Giza. An incredible feat of early project management, but the ROI timeline and labor cost would never get funded today. The Colosseum. Poor crowd flow dynamics and terrible sightlines for the cheap seats. A Thai monk's silent morning alms round. A wasted low-engagement branding opportunity for the temple's community outreach program. The underlying belief powering all of this is both staggering in its implication and utterly mundane in its origin. The belief that the American context is not a context, but the default setting. That their normal is neutral, the baseline human experience. Therefore, when confronted with a different normal, the cognitive response isn't awe. This is a different context with different rules. The response is, this context is interesting, but it's missing some key features. It's running on an older OS. The most revealing moments are often the quietest. After a monologue about optimizing Dutch bicycle traffic or streamlining the Spanish dinner schedule, there may be a pause. The local interlocutor will offer a gentle, unshakable counterpoint, something rooted in history, ecology, or social philosophy that simply makes sense within their framework. And in that moment, on the American's face, you might see a flicker, not of dawning understanding or conversion, but of a meta-realization, the realization that the two people are not just speaking different languages, but playing entirely different games on different boards. The American is playing chess, thinking several moves ahead about capture and victory. The local is tending a garden, thinking about seasons, soil health, and what will grow in 100 years. The point is not that chess is superior to gardening, or vice versa. The point is the breathtaking, often comical, confidence that the rules of chess are the only rules that exist, and that the garden is merely a poorly arranged chessboard. If this dissection of confidence as a cultural operating system, of optimization as a worldview, and of the quiet collisions that result, makes you see familiar interactions in a new light, then show the algorithm this kind of thinking has value. Hit the LIKE button. For more explorations into the unseen codes and patterns that govern human behavior and social friction, subscribe to The American Storyteller.